One afternoon in 1988, Adam Trombley was relaxing at his home outside Aspen, Colorado, when suddenly came an unexpected knock at his front door. It was his friend and colleague, Bob Dratch, a scientist and one of the world's premier experts on microwave technology. Dratch had just completed construction of a new microwave detection device he had invented and was eager to show it to someone who could appreciate it. Setting up in Trombley's office, Dratch stood shaking some loose change he had in his pocket as Trombley pointed the device at him. The intent was to show how the invention could detect even the minute signals the jingling coins generated. During the demonstration, Trombley haphazardly pointed the device away from Dratch and out his office window for a moment, when shockingly, the machine's alarm started going off, indicating extremely high microwave levels. The two men rushed out of the house and into a small forest which the office window faced. There, they were stunned to find a small antenna hidden amongst the trees, projecting powerful microwaves directly at Trombley's house. For Trombley, everything suddenly began to make sense. Earlier that year, he had been diagnosed with cancer, a known side effect of prolonged exposure to microwaves. But where had this antenna come from? Who had put it there? More importantly, what was Adam Trombley doing that someone would want to kill him for it? To answer this question, one must go back to the very beginning, back to when Adam Trombley was just a little boy. In the last year, we've all seen news of high-profile people getting their Twitter accounts hacked. People like Joe Biden, Elon Musk, and even Kanye West. And these kinds of attacks are getting more frequent and more severe. And it's not just Twitter. Facebook, eBay, Uber, Adobe, and Yahoo have leaked data such as passwords, credit card info, and driver's licenses belonging to billions of users. If someone can hack Joe Biden, just imagine how easy it would be for them to hack you. That's why I use ExpressVPN to protect my personal data online. One of the easiest ways for people to hack you is on unencrypted Wi-Fi networks, places like coffee shops, airports, hotels, etc. Anyone connected to the same network can steal your information. ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your network data so that you're protected. I have it on all my devices, and the best part is I can use it on up to 5 devices simultaneously. Protect yourself and your family by visiting expressvpn.com/universe inside you and arm yourself with an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Growing up in the 1950s, it was not unusual for Adam Trombley to see some of the most important people in the United States in his family home. Adam's father was a biochemist and a decorated Air Force officer, a man with high-level military clearance who was often consulted by high-ranking military and government officials, even the head of the CIA, on issues of great importance. Shortly after Adam's birth, his father began working on a government project with Sidney Gottlieb, the scientist who would go on to head the CIA's infamous MK-Ultra mind control experiments. The project would experiment with LSD, that hallucinogenic drug which was drawing so much interest from the U.S. government at the time. When one of the members of the project, a man named Frank Olson, died unexpectedly, apparently by falling out the window of a hotel room, Adam's father was convinced he had been murdered for his involvement in the project, and so he ventured to file an official complaint. Not only did the complaint go unheeded, but, according to Adam's father, it resulted in something much worse. Shortly after filing his complaint, Adam's father was taken for an immunization against a new biological warfare agent, part of his position as a high-ranking military officer. Except almost immediately after receiving the purported immunization, he fell ill, convincing him that he had in fact been injected with a live virus as retribution for his complaint. A few years later, he would die of cancer. "They killed Frank, and now they have killed me," he would write before his death. Nearly a decade after his father passed away, Adam Trombley was helping his mother clean her attic when he stumbled across a box he'd never noticed before. Inside were stacks of his father's journals, written in secret and in defiance of military regulations for a man in his position. Inside the journals were words which read like science fiction, They spoke of secret government projects and unbelievable advanced technologies. Reading page after page, Adam was forced to reimagine his understanding of the world as he knew it. And reimagine he did. The discovery of his father's journals would set Adam Trombly on a path he would follow for the rest of his life. He would first become an expert in geophysics and electromagnetic systems, then an inventor, working on the types of technologies he had read about on the journal's pages. By 1980, not yet 30 years old, Trombly had invented a device which he believed would be genuinely revolutionary. He called it the closed-path homopolar generator, and he alleged it was able to produce 250% more energy than was put into it. In other words, Trombly had purportedly created a device which produced energy out of nothing. It may sound impossible. In fact, according to the laws of physics, it is. The second law of thermodynamics states that efficiencies cannot be greater than 100%. More simply, you can't get more energy out of something than you put in. However, many scientists believe this is wrong. The key, according to quantum physicist John Wheeler, is that space is not empty. It is the seat of the most violent physics. Back in the 1940s, Hendrik Casimir, a Dutch physicist, postulated that vacuums were not empty voids, as commonly believed, but rather that they contained fluctuations of electromagnetic waves. Casimir believed that by holding two metal plates extremely close together in a vacuum, these waves could be trapped between them, creating a vacuum energy which could attract or repel the plates. He called this the Casimir effect, in essence, a way to create energy out of nothing. Since initially postulated, the effect had been measured and proven by many scientists. And according to Hal Puthoff, a former engineer at General Electric and consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense, these are not just fringe scientists with science fiction ideas. They are mainstream ideas being published in mainstream physics journals and being taken seriously by mainstream military and NASA-type funders. To those who believe the concept of free energy is impossible, many have asserted that the Casimir effect is a proven example of free energy that cannot be debunked. It was this type of science that Adam Trombly was building upon in constructing his closed-path homopolar generator. And the importance of his work, according to many, cannot be overstated. In the words of former Princeton University physics professor and NASA astronaut Brian O'Leary, these technologies are absolutely the most important thing that have happened in the history of the world. By 1980, Trombly would apply for a patent for his device, believing it to be an invention which would change humanity's path. Yet, much to Trombly's great surprise, his patent application was delayed and denied, and for years he existed in a sort of limbo, impatiently sitting on a secret he believed people needed to know. Finally, in 1989, Trombly was invited to give a demonstration of his device at the United Nations, a fitting venue, Trombly thought, for a discovery of this importance. The presentation was attended by diplomats, engineers, scientists, and Wall Street executives, all with prying eyes waiting to see if what Trombly said he had created could be real. To prevent any accusations of fraud, Trombly allowed a senior engineer from Boeing to examine the device beforehand. For several hours, the engineer checked for every conceivable trick Trombly might use, but found nothing. The demonstration went perfectly, with some in the audience moved to tears, believing they had seen something truly historic. As Trombly walked off the stage, he received what one diplomat called one of the longest standing ovations in the history of the UN. It seemed Trombly's invention would finally get the attention which he believed it thoroughly deserved. But before he could celebrate, something strange caught Trombly's eye. There in the crowd of onlookers was a group of Wall Street executives, men recognized as the financial backers of inventors like Trombly, huddled around one of Trombly's closest friends. What could they be talking about? Trombly wondered. His friend was no scientist, nor even someone Trombly shared thoughts on his work with. When they finished speaking, the executives approached Trombley, looking concerned. "Your friend just told us that you faked the demonstration," one said. This stunned Trombley. He had taken every conceivable step to prove the legitimacy of his demonstration, yet it appeared to be falling apart in this single moment. How could his friend have said this, and why? The executives then informed Trombley that, since he had allegedly faked his experiment, any and all future funding for his work would be cut off. At that moment, Trombley thought he knew what had happened. His friend had appeared in his life just after he'd first filed for a patent for his free energy device. It seemed clear to Trombley that his so-called friend must have been some sort of operative who had infiltrated his life with the intent of sabotaging him at a crucial moment. Perhaps this sounds like a paranoid assertion, but remember that at the time, Trombley had already discovered an antenna projecting microwaves at his house. He was already fighting cancer. Perhaps he had a reason to be paranoid. Trombley himself admits that the story of his life sounds a bit like a bad spy novel, and in fact, it goes far beyond a microwave antenna or Wall Street executives. There was a time at the height of his research when his laboratory was ransacked. The only thing that was left was the tube of working mechanical drawings for that generator, Trombley explained, which I had hidden under a suspended ceiling before I left. Then there were, according to Trombley's count, over 50 attempts on his life, including really serious poisonings, and numerous times in which my wife has had to revive me and give me CPR. Perhaps this does sound like a bad spy novel, except for people working on the types of things Trombley was working on. These sorts of stories are not all that rare. One day, man will connect his apparatus to the very wheelwork of the universe, and the very forces that motivate the planets in their orbits and cause them to rotate will rotate his own machinery. These were the words of legendary inventor Nikola Tesla. At the height of his incredible career, Tesla was devoting much of his time to the concept of free energy, believing it possible to tap into and use the energy inherent in the universe. In 1905, he filed a patent titled The Art of Transmitting Electrical Energy Through the Natural Medium, and later that year finished construction of the incredible 187-foot-tall Wardenclyffe Tower in Shoreham, New York. The tower was designed to pump the natural energy of the Earth skyward, where it could be harnessed by homes and vehicles using small antennas. When just it seemed that Tesla would realize his goal, his funding was abruptly pulled. Crucially, his benefactor had been one J.P. Morgan, the financial tycoon who'd become one of the richest men in the world, largely by funding and profiting from fossil fuel companies and General Electric. In other words, Morgan had become a wealthy man off the very industries which would collapse if Tesla's free energy system ever became a reality. According to those close to the situation, Morgan did not only pull his own funding to Tesla, but purposefully scuttled any future ways Tesla could raise money. Without adequate funding, Tesla would never again reach the heights of the Wardenclyffe Tower. However, he continued to work on the concept of free energy behind the scenes and out of the spotlight. Finally, in 1943, Tesla got the break he'd been waiting for when he was able to procure a meeting with American President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, during which time he would be given the opportunity to explain to the president how very real and very possible the concept of free energy really was. Unfortunately, Tesla would not make it to that meeting. Shortly before it was scheduled to take place, Tesla was found dead in the New York City hotel room he'd been living in. Immediately after his death, the room was swept by U.S. government officials who collected all of Tesla's documents and sent them directly to the FBI. What the documents contained was never revealed, only that they were, in the words of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, most secret. Is it possible that the secrets were of free energy and a technology J.P. Morgan thought he had stopped all those decades before? And are these the types of secrets that can get a person killed? At about the same time as Tesla was working on his concepts of free energy, a contemporary named T. Henry Moray was doing something similar. Moray was an electrical engineer who, in the 1920s and 30s, developed an energy device which he asserted could generate power without any human-made input. He called it the Moray valve, explaining that by tuning in to the radiant energy of the universe, the device could generate enough energy to power a small factory. By his own admission, he was greatly influenced by the work of Tesla. Throughout the 1930s, Moray gave demonstrations of his device to scientists and politicians, none of whom could detect any fraud. However, Moray had his patent applications for the device repeatedly rejected. Despite his demonstrations, he was told by the patent office in no uncertain terms that there is no such thing as free energy. Worse, his laboratory was ransacked on more than one occasion, and he was often the recipient of death threats. He even went so far as to make his car bulletproof, due, he claimed, to the many times his vehicle had been shot at by mysterious assailants in black cars. By the late 1930s, the U.S. government had ordered that engineers from the Rural Electrification Administration be allowed to work alongside Moray on the development of his device. It was one of these engineers who one day destroyed the working model of the device by smashing it to pieces with an axe. Afterwards, Moray was never able to rebuild a device because, like Tesla, he could never again obtain funding for his work. These types of occurrences around anyone proposing concepts of free energy only accelerated into modern times. Take Bruce De Palma, a Harvard-educated physicist and a professor of the subject at the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology for nearly 2 decades. In the late 1970s, as Adam Trombly was working on his closed-path homopolar generator, De Palma was constructing the first working model of an invention he called the N machine, a device which, according to him, provided a new way of extracting energy from space. Incredibly, according to his tests, the device could produce up to 5 times the energy required to run it. In 1978, a Stanford University professor of electrical engineering named Robert Kincheloe independently studied the device with a skeptical eye. After doing so, he concluded, "There is indeed a situation here whereby energy is being obtained from a previously unknown and unexplained source. This is a conclusion that most scientists and engineers would reject out of hand as being a violation of accepted laws of physics, and if true, has incredible implications." On the precipice of something extraordinary, De Palma was contacted by the CIA in 1980, the same year Trombly filed a patent for his own free energy device. According to De Palma, he was told that if he continued with his work, I would have my head blown off. Understandably fearing for his life, De Palma fled the United States for New Zealand, where he continued his work, far away from the prying eyes of the U.S. government. By 1997, he was able to complete construction of a fully functional, updated version of his N machine. He was scheduled to present an official public testing of the device in Auckland, when only 2 weeks before the presentation was set to take place, he died unexpectedly. Without its proprietor, De Palma's research and his device were disregarded. At about the same time that Trombly and De Palma were achieving their breakthroughs, another of their contemporaries was working on something similar halfway around the world. In the mid-1980s, Paramahamsa Tewari, at one time the executive director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, came forward with an invention he called the space power generator. By using a magnetized cylinder rotating at high speeds, Tewari asserted that he had created a device which could produce an efficiency of over 250%, in effect, creating energy from the vacuum of space. In 1986, Tewari won first prize at a scientific conference in Germany by presenting a crude facsimile of this free energy device. From there, he continued to work on perfecting the technical aspects of his device and his calculations day in and day out for many years. Finally, in 2017, he was ready. That year, he submitted a paper entitled Structural Relation Between the Vacuum of Space and the Electron to the esteemed Physics Essays journal, in which he explained precisely how electrons were birthed from the vacuum of space, a detailed roadmap of the technical aspects of free energy production. 2 weeks after this study was submitted, Tawadi suddenly died. Like Tesla and De Palma before him, he had died on the eve of the big public reveal of his life's work. Perhaps by now it is easy to see that Adam Trombley's claims of his life being like a bad spy novel are not all that ridiculous after all. Time and time again, from Nikola Tesla to Paramahamsa Tewari, proponents of free energy have been attacked, their work suppressed, their funding pulled, their lives ended unexpectedly. In fact, it appears that the suppression of free energy technology is something of an official practice. In the U.S., all patent applications fall under the jurisdiction of the Invention Secrecy Act, which states that patents can be withheld and new inventions subject to secrecy orders if they are deemed a threat to national security. In 2020, there were nearly 6,000 such secrecy orders in effect, including for the patent submitted by Adam Trombley's free energy device. But why? Why suppress and subvert something which seems like it would be so beneficial to humanity? Consider the words of former U.S. Patent Examiner Thomas Vallone, who claims the existence of a secret 9-member patent committee whose purpose is to screen out any inventions which may threaten the power of the fossil fuel companies. Remember Tesla's antagonism with J.P. Morgan, who had gotten rich off fossil fuels and electricity? Free energy not only challenges the established laws of physics, but the power structure of the entire world, a structure explicitly based on the proliferation of non-renewable energy. Certainly, it is not much of a stretch to suggest that those looking to keep their hold on power would resort to intimidation, manipulation, even murder to do so. One final thing which must be mentioned: Adam Trombley did not die of the cancer he developed as his house was being microwaved. He is still alive today, and in fact, still working on the cause of free energy through his Project Earth organization. If history is any guide, you may want to check it out while you still can. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and if you're new, hit subscribe and the bell next to it for future notifications.